I shouldn't be telling you this, but if you're from northwestern Montana, if you've ever hiked the backcountry trails around Glacier, if you've felt that crawling sensation between your shoulder blades when you're alone in those woods, you need to know what I found up there. And if you think you can handle hearing this through to the end, hit that like button now. Consider it a warning to yourself. 3 months ago, I was just another search and rescue volunteer. 26 years old, born and raised in Whitefish, spent my summers guiding tourists through the park since I was 18. I thought I knew every trail, every hidden creek, every rock formation from Lake McDonald to the Continental Divide. I was wrong, dead wrong. It started when Grant Marcuccio went missing in August. You might have seen it on the news. 32-year-old mountaineer, experienced climber, vanished without a trace on what should have been a routine day hike. The official story was that his body was found 2 days later by Two Bear Air, but that's not the whole truth. That's not even close to the whole truth. I was part of the ground crew that morning when the helicopter spotted something. Radio crackled with coordinates, and we hiked through thick pine and huckleberry to reach the location. What we found wasn't just Grant. What we found was Grant's body, arranged in a perfect circle of stones, each rock the exact same size, his boots placed precisely 10 feet away, pointing toward the tree line. His clothes were folded neatly beside him. No tears, no blood, no signs of struggle. But here's what they didn't put in the news. His eyes were wide open, staring at something in the canopy above, and his lips were pulled back in what I can only describe as a smile of absolute terror. The ranger in charge, Sarah Tollefson, she's worked these mountains for 15 years. I watched her face go pale as paper when she saw the scene. She made us all sign additional confidentiality agreements that day, said it was standard protocol for ongoing investigations. Standard protocol, my ass. I've been on dozens of recovery missions, and I'd never seen anything like that before. But what really got to me, what's been eating at me for 3 months now, was what I found in the dirt next to those perfectly arranged stones. Boot prints. Not Grant's boots. We had those. These prints were smaller, barefoot impressions pressed deep into the earth with what looked like elongated toes, and they formed a trail leading directly into the densest part of the forest, where the old mining roads peter out into nothing but wilderness. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds like one of those missing 411 stories, right? People vanishing under impossible circumstances in national parks, leaving behind evidence that doesn't make sense. Well, you'd be right to think that. Because 3 days after we found Grant, I decided to follow those prints. Have you ever made a decision that you knew, even as you were making it, would change everything? That's what this felt like. Standing at the edge of that trail with my headlamp cutting through pre-dawn darkness, knowing I should turn around, knowing I should call this in, knowing I should do literally anything except what I was about to do. But I couldn't shake the image of Grant's terrified smile. I couldn't stop thinking about those impossibly neat stone circles. The prints led deeper into the mountains than any trail I'd ever mapped. They wound through groves of ancient cedar, past hidden meadows that didn't appear on any topographical survey, along the edges of ravines so deep I couldn't see the bottom even with my flashlight. And the strangest thing, the prints were always fresh, like whatever made them was walking just ahead of me, always just out of sight. After about 2 hours of hiking, the forest went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, dead quiet. No bird calls, no insects, no wind through the trees, just my breathing and the crunch of pine needles under my boots. That's when I started hearing the whispers. At first, I thought it was just wind through the branches, but wind doesn't call your name. Wind doesn't speak in voices you almost recognize. The whispers were coming from every direction at once, layering over each other until they became this horrible chorus of sound that seemed to burrow into my skull. And underneath it all, barely audible, I could hear someone crying. I followed the sound to a clearing I swear wasn't on any map I'd ever studied. In the center stood a ring of 7 massive pine trees, each one carved with symbols I didn't recognize, spirals and intersecting lines that seemed to shift and move when I looked at them directly. Between the trees, scattered across the forest floor like some kind of twisted gallery, were personal belongings. Backpacks, hiking boots, water bottles, cell phones. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all arranged in those same precise circles of stones I'd seen around Grant's body. And there, sitting against the largest tree with her back to me, was a woman in a red jacket. I called out to her, asked if she was okay, if she needed help. She didn't move. I got closer, and that's when I saw the truth that's been following me home every night since. She was mummified, completely preserved, like she'd been sitting there for months or maybe years, but her clothes were pristine, her hair was perfect, and her skin had this weird waxy quality that reflected my flashlight beam like polished stone. But here's the part that makes my hands shake even now. She was holding something, a small digital camera, the kind hikers use to document their trips, and it was still recording. I should have run. I should have grabbed that camera and run straight back to the ranger station. Instead, I hit playback. The footage showed the woman, her name was Emily, I learned later, Emily Chen from Seattle, hiking with 3 friends, laughing, taking selfies, enjoying a perfect August day in Glacier National Park. But as the recording played, their voices started to change. They became confused, disoriented. The GPS on their phones stopped working. The trail they'd been following seemed to shift and branch in ways that shouldn't be possible. And then, one by one, her friends started walking away. Not running, not panicking, just walking. Like they were being called by something only they could hear. Emily kept recording, kept begging them to come back, but they disappeared into the tree line without looking back. The last frame showed Emily alone in the clearing, pointing the camera at herself one final time, whispering, "If someone finds this, tell my family I'm sorry. Tell them the mountains took me, but I went willingly. I had to. I can hear it calling, and I can't fight it anymore." The recording cut to black, but the camera kept running. Hours and hours of footage showing Emily sitting in that exact position, never moving, never aging, just waiting. And in the background, barely visible in the infrared display, I could see shapes moving between the trees. Tall, impossibly thin figures that seemed to glide rather than walk, always staying just at the edge of the frame. I don't know how long I stood there watching that footage, but when I finally looked up, the sun was setting, and I realized I'd been in that clearing for over 8 hours. 8 hours that felt like 8 minutes. And that's when I noticed something that made my blood turn to ice water. My own name was carved into the bark of the tree Emily was leaning against. Fresh carving, like it had just been done. Have you ever had a moment where reality just breaks? Where everything you thought you understood about the world suddenly becomes negotiable? That's what happened to me in that clearing. Because I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd never been there before. But I also knew, somehow, that part of me had always been there. Part of me belonged there. I ran. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, crashing through underbrush, following my GPS back toward the main trail, not caring about the branches tearing at my clothes or the rocks cutting through my hiking boots. But no matter how fast I ran, I could hear them behind me. Not footsteps, something worse. The sound of air moving around large bodies, the whisper of fabric or skin brushing against tree branches, and underneath it all, that same horrible chorus of voices calling my name. I made it back to my truck as full darkness fell, and I drove straight home without stopping, without looking back, without even checking my mirrors. But when I got to my apartment and looked at my gear, I found something that shouldn't have been there. The camera. Emily's camera was in my backpack, even though I know I never picked it up, and it was still recording. The next morning, I tried to forget everything that happened. I told myself it was altitude sickness, dehydration, maybe some kind of psychological break from the stress of the search and rescue mission. I put the camera in a drawer and tried to move on with my life. But the dreams started that very night. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that clearing. But in the dreams, I wasn't alone. All the missing people were there. Grant, Emily, dozens of others I didn't recognize. They were sitting in their circles of stones, perfectly preserved, perfectly still, all facing that ring of 7 trees. And they were all smiling that same terrible smile I'd seen on Grant's face. But the worst part was that in the dreams, I was smiling too. I tried to research what I'd seen. I spent weeks going through missing 411 cases, indigenous legends, geological surveys, anything that might explain what was happening in those mountains. What I found was a pattern going back over a century. People disappearing in that exact area, always experienced hikers, always under impossible circumstances. Search parties finding evidence that didn't make sense. Clothes folded neatly, personal items arranged in precise patterns, footprints that led nowhere. And in almost every case, there were reports from other hikers of hearing voices calling their names, of seeing figures moving between the trees, of feeling an overwhelming compulsion to leave the established trails and walk deeper into the wilderness. The local Blackfeet Nation has stories about that area too, stories they don't like to share with outsiders. But I found an elderly tribal member, William Running Wolf, who was willing to talk. He told me about the Watchers, ancient spirits that guard the boundary between the world of the living and something else, something hungry. He said the mountains have always taken people, but only those who were already marked, already chosen. The Watchers don't hunt, he told me. They wait. And when someone stumbles into their territory, someone who carries the right kind of loneliness, the right kind of pain, they offer a choice. You can fight it and die afraid, or you can accept it and become part of something larger than yourself. I asked him how someone would know if they'd been marked. He looked at me with eyes that seemed to see right through my skull and said, "You already know." That night, I checked the camera again. The recording had advanced. Somehow, impossible as it sounds, the footage now showed me in that clearing, standing exactly where I'd stood, at the exact time I'd been there. But in the video, I wasn't alone. The preserved figures were all looking at me, their heads turned in perfect unison, and one of them, Emily, was holding up her hand in what looked like a greeting. And at the very end of the new footage, just before it cut to black again, I could see my own mouth moving, forming words I didn't remember speaking. I understand now. I'm ready. I deleted the files. I threw the camera in a dumpster behind a gas station on the outskirts of town. I put in for a transfer to a different Park Service office, packed my apartment, and left Whitefish without telling anyone where I was going. But it didn't matter, because the dreams followed me. The whispers followed me, and no matter where I went, I could feel them watching, waiting for me to make the choice I knew I'd eventually have to make. 2 weeks ago, I received a package with no return address. Inside was Emily's camera, along with a printed photo I'd never seen before. It showed the 7-tree clearing, but this time, all the preserved figures were standing, facing the camera. And there, in the center of the group, was an empty space exactly my size. On the back of the photo, written in what looked like my own handwriting, were the words, "It's time to come home." I tried to throw the photo away. I burned it, actually, watched it curl and blacken in my kitchen sink. But when I woke up the next morning, it was on my nightstand again, pristine and untouched. I know what's going to happen. I know because I can feel it building inside me like pressure before a storm. The voices are getting louder, more insistent. The dreams are lasting longer. And every morning when I look in the mirror, my reflection looks a little more like those preserved figures in the clearing, still living, still breathing, but somehow separate from the world around me. Tomorrow, I'm driving back to Glacier. I'm going to hike that trail one more time, follow those footprints to their source, and make the choice I've been avoiding for 3 months. Maybe I'll fight it. Maybe I'll find a way to break free from whatever hold they have on me. But probably not. Probably I'll take my place in that circle of stones, add my belongings to that twisted gallery of the taken, and wait for the next lost soul to stumble into our territory. Wait to offer them the same choice I was given: die afraid and alone, or become part of something ancient and patient and eternally watching. If you live in Montana, if you hike the backcountry around Glacier, If you've ever felt like you were being watched in those deep woods, trust that feeling. Turn around. Get back to the main trails. Don't follow voices that call your name. Don't investigate sounds that seem out of place. And for God's sake, don't let curiosity lead you into clearings that don't appear on any map. Because once you see those 7 trees, once you understand what the Watchers are offering, there's no going back. The choice becomes inevitable. Just a matter of when, not if. And if you're watching this video late at night, alone in your room, and you hear something calling your name from outside, well, maybe you've already been marked too. Maybe we'll see each other soon, in that place between the world of the living and whatever comes next. I hope I'm wrong about all of this. I hope tomorrow I'll find that clearing empty, those cameras finally silent, those ancient agreements finally broken. But hope is just another kind of hunger, isn't it? And the mountains are always feeding. Like and subscribe if you made it through.